pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Could you please call the roll?
Trustee Gray?
Present.
Trustee Bush? Trustee Rogers?
Present.
Trustee Sweets?
Present.
Trustee Piazzino?
Present.
Trustee Variance?
Present.
Mayor Yuka?
Present. Are there any amendments to the agenda?
I believe there are.
I've got one. We're going to table new business. Trustee Holtz was not able to make it tonight, and some of the stuff we have to discuss, we would like her to be here, but she had a death in the family. So we'll push it off to December 11th, if that's okay. Yeah. Could I please have a... So moved.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. First, do we have the band here from Lockport Township High School?
Yes, we do, Mayor.
We do. Okay. You guys want to come up front so this way everyone can see it too? Because we're all proud of you. We want to make sure they know who you are. Tonight, we're privileged to have representatives from the Lockport High School Marching Band with us. It is with great pride for our community that we are recognizing the Lockport Township High School's band achievements. Achievements of this fall included first place in the Class 6A Illinois State Marching Band Championship held at Illinois State University. Very good. Second place, finals and caption awards for general effect and crowd appeal. Third, seventh place overall finish in the Bands of America Super Regional Finals in Indianapolis. This is the ensemble third state championship with first place wins in 2013 and 2015. The Lockport Township High School competitive marching band is made up of 175 members and is led by Director Brian Colby, with the assistant of Associate Director of Bands, Aaron Kennedy. The band has worked very hard to achieve this prestigious awards, practicing 2.5 hours, 3 days each week, and 8 hours almost every Saturday. We salute the accomplishment of the Lockport High School marching band members and present this 2019 Certificate of Outstanding Achievement to the band directors and to the Lockport Township High School 2019 marching band members. Congratulations.
Mr. Mayor, if we could pose for a picture.
Okay.
You guys can come stand right here, please. Do you want to hold?
All right. You guys are doing it too. Nobody got it, right? Whoop.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
closed session minutes, all of which shall remain sealed until future board consideration and approval to release July 8th, 2013, October 6th, 2016, November 22nd, 2016, December 14th, 2016, January 11th, 2017, and October 25th, 2017. June 27th of 2018, February 13th of 2019, May 22nd of 2019, and June 5th, 2019, and July 10th of 2019. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Trustee Variance.
Second.
Trustee Casmino. Discussion. Gia, could you please call the roll? Or, no, I can do the all in favor. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. G, reports and communications from the mayor and other officers. I will go first on this one. I just want to make sure anyone starting on 159th Street does see that it's finished. They've got the road open on both sides. They still have to do the medians, but they have some of them finished up already. I saw them putting paint on the streets today to separate the lanes, and the rain was following them right behind it. So I'm not quite sure if they're going to be there tomorrow. But to all the businesses that have been so patient, and to all the residents that have had to deal with this too, I'm very happy to see that this is finally finished. And spring of next year, they will button up all the landscaping. Second, I want to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving, seeing it's in 2 days. And on Black Friday, if you can, shop Homer Glen. From there, we'll go to the trustees. Oops. Oh, one other thing. Village Hall is closed for Thanksgiving holiday. As a reminder, Village Hall will be closed on Thursday, November 28th and Friday, November 29th in observance of Thanksgiving. We want to wish everyone a safe and happy Thanksgiving holiday. Homer for the holidays too. Join the village in lighting up our new holiday light display. This event will take place on Saturday, December 7th from 4:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. Homer for the holidays begins this year with a lighting ceremony at the Active Corn Heritage Park. The event includes monumental holiday light sculptures and thousands of mini lights, new pole lights, and tree spritzers. Photos with Santa, holiday crafts, live music, train rides, hot cocoa, and more to follow. Food trucks will have dinner available for purchase, and for more information, please visit www.homerglenil.org. Now we go to the trustees. Start down with Trustee Suisse.
Thank you, Mayor. I do not have a report, but I'd like to wish all the residents a good, healthy, and happy, and safe Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Trustee Suisse. Trustee Casmino.
No report, Mayor.
Thank you, Trustee Casmino. Trustee Rogers.
On top of Homer for the holidays on the 7th, I just wanted to remind the residents that for the first time, we do have Sled Hill that's open this year. First year that it's open. We might get snow this week, so it is open, so hopefully you'll be able to take advantage of it.
Thank you, Trustee Rogers. Trustee Berry.
No report, Mayor.
Thank you, Trustee Berry. And Trustee Gray.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to mention that the Chicago Bears, Jewel Osco, and Salvation Army have kicked off our annual coat drive. As we all know, Chicago winters can be miserable for everyone, but for some people they are life-threatening. It may seem like a small thing, but when you donate a coat to someone in need, you're truly making a difference. Residents wishing to help can drop off new and gently used coats and other winter accessories at the Jewel on Belt Road or here at Village Hall. We'll be setting up a winter coat donation drop box throughout the month of December during normal business hours, and coats for children and women are the greatest demand. All donations will be given to the Salvation Army for distribution. And toys for tots are being accepted at the Northwest Homer Fire District, all of their stations. Northwest Homer's been continuously collecting toys for 25 years, and they'll also be accepted at Homer Township Fire District Station 1. They will take them at their other stations also and make sure that they get over to Station 1, so you can really drop it off in any fire station in Homer Glen. And I'd also like to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving, and that concludes my report.
Thank you, Trustee Gray. Village Attorney.
No report, Your Honor.
You. Public safety officials.
I do, Mayor. Thanks, sir. Mayor, trustees, public. Just
Many of our residents received a phone call notification through an emergency alert system around 12:30 a.m. I'm sure some of you got woke up, as did I. It was reference a missing endangered person, okay? For those of you that don't know, I apologize for any loss of sleep, but the Sheriff's Department authorized the notification due to the importance of locating the individual as soon as possible for her safety, okay? I am happy to report that the individual was located safe and sound, thank goodness. It leapfrogs to, what is this emergency alert program? Some of you might not even be aware of it, so I just wanted to get that word out to you real quickly, okay? The emergency notification system is maintained through Will County EMA, which is the Emergency Management Association. For more information, you can go to the EMA website, and I'll give it to you real quick for those of you that have pen and paper handy. It's all one word, willcountyema.org. On the home page, look for the tab, Emergency Notification Sign Up is what it says, Emergency Notification Sign Up, okay? This service allows you to sign up to receive emergency and non-emergency notifications through your preferred method of communication, which could be a cell phone, work phone, text message, email, home phone, and more. You can also choose the locations you want to be contacted about. So the area around your home, your parents' home, workplace, your child's school, as long as these locations are within the boundaries of participating Will County communities. So it's got to be in Will County, okay, everybody? Will County has chosen to automatically import into the mass notification system publicly available landline phone information from the white pages. If you do not sign up for this system, you will only receive emergency alert notifications on your landline phone, but nowhere else. However, if you have an unlisted traditional landline or you only use a cell phone, you must sign up to receive any emergency or non-emergency alerts. A special note is the system is not being used as a severe weather notification system. The website directs you to seek out weather-related info from official channels such as the National Weather Service. You can create an account and add your contact information and location information into the mass notification system. All information you provide will be kept strictly confidential. If you choose to stop receiving notifications, you're not going to get these emergency alerts, okay? You can stop receiving them at any time by removing your contact information from your profile, but like I said, it's in your best interest to be notified about these emergencies. By signing up, you control how you want to be contacted, okay, everybody? I kind of flew through that, and usually I'm a better speaker than that, but I want to make sure I didn't miss anything off of this sheet. Most of this information is on that website I gave you, and I'll repeat it just for anybody who wants to write it down again. www.willcountyema.org. Okay? That's my report.
Thank you, Lieutenant.
Thank you, Mayor.
Village Manager?
No report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Next will be public comment. And if everyone could please try to keep this to 3 minutes. First would be Janice Wood.
Hi, good evening. My name is Janice Wood. My husband Michael and I have owned a home on 151st Street in Homer, Glen for 25 years. Upon reading a letter to the editor in the Homer Horizon newspaper, we were made aware of a proposed widening of 151st Street. Apparently, our neighbors were aware of this because they received a letter in the mail. We had no notification at all. They also got a drawing. Okay, we're very concerned because of the following. First of all, our safety. Our home is near the top of the hill. As it is now, getting out of our driveway is a challenge. Please explain to me how widening the road will make it safer for us and our neighbors to exit our driveway. Secondly, land. We, and I'm sure all the neighbors affected, do not want to give up any property for a project we find unnecessary. Will we be fairly compensated for our property? And lastly, the reason. We as residents need to be informed as to why the road needs to be widened. The road is in good condition. There is only one business that I can think of on 151st Street between Archer and Bell, and that is Bankston Farm. The rest is residential, and of course the village has property on 151st Street also. You really need to give the residents a very good reason for using our taxes for what we see as an unnecessary project. Thank you.
You're welcome. John, you're next for the stop signs.
Good evening, my name is John Renish, and I live at Cyrstal Lake Estate Subdivision. We lived in Homer, Glen for approximately 20 years. I'm also the president of our homeowners association. I am representing the association tonight to address the village board regarding an action item for stop signs in our subdivision. But also, I want to make the board aware of concern that we've had with this process and what we've experienced in trying to address the solution to a traffic calming issue. Please understand our concerns we bring forward tonight are not directed to any of the elected officials or not to our current village manager. When we started this process, Mayor Yukich, you were the trustee and you were chair of the safety committee. Since then, our subdivision has worked with several other trustees that have chaired said committee. Trustee Costa, Trustee Rogers, Trustees Gray, and Trustee Holtz. 5 trustees. That sounds like a lot. That's because it is. It has been 10 years process of constant challenge. 10 years. Not from our trustees, but from a few village employees. To put this in perspective, my twin daughters were in first grade when we engaged in this conversation. They are now graduating seniors from high school and moving on to college. From the onset, we were met with resistance and constant bureaucracy. The first discussion took place late fall 2008. Excuse me. But we were told the traffic study could not be conducted until the spring of 2009 because of weather. After the traffic study, it was recommended to put up yellow information signs. They were ineffective. But before we can do anything else, we needed another traffic study. Next, we had police presence. That worked, and it was very sustainable, so thank you very much. That was not sustainable. What is the next step, you ask? You guessed it, another traffic study. This has gone on for 10 years, and I think you kind of get the picture. This process, to say the least, has been extremely frustrating for our community. We have placed phone calls and sent emails that go unanswered. I will give the village board one recent example. On October 2nd, I received an email from Mr. Smolowitz informing us that there would be a safety meeting, and if we had any questions, please don't hesitate to contact him. I responded on that same day, October 2nd, expressing to Mr. Smolowitz that we do have questions and welcome his invitation for a discussion. I provided the following dates, October 3rd, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, anytime after 2, trying to be flexible and trying to respect his evening hours. I cleared my schedule and waited for a response. October 4th, next day, no response. October 5th, no response. 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, no response. Finally, response came on October 11th, 9 days later. Mr. Smolowitz wrote me, "Can you give me some dates and times you're available?" Seriously. This one example is the epitome of what our community has been dealing with for the past 10 years. Only when we have included you, Mayor Yukich, or our trustees, have we received a timely response. Last week, I attended a safety committee meeting in which the stop signs were discussed. Although I believe that most on the committee are trying to do the right thing, there are a few village employees that have been obstructed and undermining the whole process. This has not been a collaborative process with our community, not at all. The process has not even been objective. For example, in your report tonight, there is no mention of the following items that we think should be a consideration. Nowhere in your report tonight is there a consideration to let the board know that there are no sidewalks in our subdivision. Where is the data that shows our families that like to take evening walks? Or even because of lack of sidewalks, kids have to ride their bikes on the street Where's the measure of standard? Why is this not in the report? Nowhere in your packet tonight, except for the HOA having to submit a letter, is it stated that 80% of our residents signed a petition supporting stop signs. And now 100% want them to stay. Nowhere in your report, except for the HOA gathering the documentation and submitting the information, does it provide that both school districts support the locations of the stop signs. But for the HOA seeking this information, it would have never been a consideration. You see, 10 years we've faced with employees not seeking to understand our community needs. It has not been collaborative, it has not been objective, but rather an effort to stall and undermine the process. I'll end my comments tonight and share with you a comment made by a community member during our last safety meeting. This person is reserved, he is thoughtful when he speaks, and he's very well respected in our community. Before standing up and addressing the safety committee during a conversation, he leaned over and said this to me: "John, I cannot take this anymore. And you don't know how much, I don't know how you've put up with this for 10 years," and then addressed the committee with these words: "We became a village so we can empower ourselves. We became a village so we can listen to our community and have the ability to address their concerns. We became a village so that we could do the right thing. We became a village to have this exact ability, to have the authority to place stop signs in our community." These words were spoken by our first mayor, Russ Patrizzi. Tonight you have before you a resolution to maintain stop signs that have been in place for the past 6 months, something that all of our subdivision supports. We ask the village board to approve this resolution, and I want to thank you for your time tonight.
Jerry Gianfracio?
I gave him my 3 minutes.
Okay. Ken Larson?
Mayor, good evening. Trustees, good evening. My name's Ken Larson. I'm a 20-year resident of Homer Glen. I'm here on behalf of Homer Athletic Club. Been a board member with HAC for approximately 8 years. And for you, those that don't know, Homer Athletic Club, we're a 503c nonprofit organization. We offer sports to the youth in the community. We have a basketball program for boys and girls. We offer a volleyball as well for boys and girls, and we have a baseball and softball program. As many of you know, HAC has been around in this community for over 60 years, and we're very proud of the work that we do. I'm a volunteer. We do not collect a paycheck for our work we do at the club, and I am here today to ask again if the village would offer us a sponsorship. I've been here several times and I'm always told no for whatever reason, so I'm asking again if we could get a commitment from the village, from the mayor and the trustees for a sponsorship from the village.
I'll discuss it with them, Ken. What are you looking for?
Whatever you could do for us. We have several different sponsorships, so whatever you could do would be great. We would greatly appreciate it. So, as you know, most of our funds come from sponsorship and the members of our club. And given that the village, we do not have a park district, ourselves, the Salients and the soccer program act as somewhat of a park district for the youth in this area that would like to contribute to sports. So, given the fact that we've been around 60 years, I hope that you would all reconsider and see what the village could do for us.
All right. I can run past the discussion that you and I have had over the years too, is there's a separation between the township and the village of Homer Glen. That's township's project for the sports and for the soccer and for anything else that goes on over there. I don't have an issue talking to the board to see if they're all in favor of doing something that would be, I think, right. But again, it's, let me talk to the trustees, and I'll get back to you. And if you actually, what you could do is, this week's kind of screwed up with Thanksgiving in a couple of days. See if we can set up an appointment for one day next week, and I will bring you in and we can discuss this.
Okay, that's fair enough. That's all we ask. So, thank you very much. Appreciate your time and have a good holiday, everyone.
You too.
Could I meet the form with someone, or should I just bring it next week?
Could you give it to Joe for right now?
Sure.
So this way we have it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. Next would be Jennifer Constantino.
Good evening. My name is Jennifer Consolino. I live in the Farmview subdivision on the other side of the cornfield. Excuse me. Now, I'm here tonight because I have questions about the sports complex that you guys are looking to put in the line action tonight for passing into phase 2 and spending $35,000. As a resident of Farmview, I've lived there for over 10 years, and I have a lot of concerns. I understand that our community needs to have things that bring in revenue. I'm all for growth and expansion to an extent, but unfortunately, it gives a lot of concerns to me and my neighbors as we live right alongside of where you want to put the complex in. And what I have are some questions. I don't know if you're willing to respond to them tonight, or if you could take them into consideration. That I would greatly appreciate. Are you willing to poll residents in the surrounding areas and subdivisions of the complex to see if they are in favor of this? Can you guarantee that residents will be able to utilize the facility in some fashion? How much is this going to cost our residents for new infrastructure? This would be to accommodate the structure, roads, whatnot, all around, from 151st to 159th, from Parker to Cedar. Look at all the residents that this affects. Physically, what will we have to deal with basically on a daily basis for the time that this gets built to the time, not just while it's being built, you have to think about forever afterward. It's going to change our traffic, our pattern of life, daily noise level, lighting at night, all these things that we move to that subdivision or to Homer Glen to enjoy, you're going to be infringing on. And that needs to be taken into consideration at some point. I mean, can you guarantee that, you're not going to have to levy taxes on us for this complex because you're going to need to accommodate the infrastructure? How can you accommodate residents in the subdivision surrounding the entire plan? Since traffic is going to be permanently changed and increased on our surrounding roads, noise level and lighting, whatnot, these are part of the reasons that we live here. You'll be pushing residents to leave an already non-tax friendly state when everybody wants out of here as soon as they can. Have you thought any offers of tax incentives or anything else for the daily inconvenience that we're going to incur if this is forced upon us for the rest of the time that we remain here? How does this benefit me as a resident or my community? So please take that into consideration when you guys are talking about this and thinking about big dollars. It really does personally affect a lot of people that live around here. And that's not why we moved here. It's not why I pay a ton of taxes to live here. So thank you for your time. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Jennifer.
I appreciate your support and all, but we need to keep the noise level to a minimum, okay? Keep it professional.
Tom Petridis.
Mr. Mayor, I'll pass. My two neighbors, Janice, they cover pretty much what I'm here for.
Okay. Thank you. Public comment is done. Next is the consent agenda. All matters listed under the consent agenda are considered routine by the village board and will not be enacted by one, and will be enacted by one motion. Is there a motion to approve the following items? 1, consider for approval the accounts payable for the period of November 15, 2019
through November 27, 2019, in the amount of $512,605.04. 2, consider for approval the Treasurer's report of cash and investments for the period ending October 31st, 2019. 3, consider for approval the Village of Homer Glen's October legal bills for Mahoney, Silverman, and Cross LLC in the amount of $11,780.15. Consider for approval an intergovernmental agreement with Homer Township Road District to provide services for the setup, operation, and tear down of the 2020 Homer Community Festival in the amount of $8,000.
So moved.
Trustee Rogers.
Second.
Trustee Variance. Madam Clerk, is there any discussion? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Gray.
Aye.
Trustee Rogers.
Aye.
Trustee Swayze.
Aye.
Trustee Variance.
Aye.
Trustee Kazmino.
Aye.
Motion carries. Legislation and action items. 1, professional services agreement with the Sports Facilities Advisory LLC. Tonight, we have Gary Smallshaw from the Sports Facility Advisory. Mr. Smallshaw shall give us a short presentation and then answer any questions.
All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Gary Smolsher. I'm a Strategic Development Advisor with Sports Facilities Advisory. We're a firm based in Clearwater Beach, Florida. And I did enjoy this cold and rainy trip through the streets today, and actually lived in the north side of the country for many years, so brings back a lot of memories. The goal today in terms of agenda is just to really talk through at a high level the market opportunity report that was delivered and I believe released for public consumption. It was a 138-page report that our firm had put together. And just a reminder of essentially why we're here today. I'm going to give us a little bit of background on our firm as well as the sports tourism travel industry. In 2015, the travel industry, sports tourism travel industry was estimated to be about $15 billion. And now the latest statistics have it approaching $18 billion. So what's significant about it is it's the only sector of the travel and tourism industry that hasn't declined at any quarter of the recession. So it's fairly resistant, and that's because parents who have kids who play sport, are willing to spend more money because they ultimately get to spend more time with their kids. So this is an ongoing industry that is larger actually than the NFL, which is a $15 billion industry. So a few reminders about our firm. Our goal is to improve the health and economic vitality of the communities that we serve. And we essentially have served over 2,000 communities to date, more than $10 billion in planned and funded facilities across the nation. Our work is all over the country. We even have some international projects. We have two divisions, essentially, a planning and funding side, which does the strategic planning and financial performer work for organizations who are looking to get into the youth and amateur sports industry. And then we also have a management firm. So quite oftentimes, our management side will get a report that we have to produce, and we have to deliver the report to the management team. We have to manage to our numbers. So we're very conservative about the numbers that we put together and very credible across the industry. We are also the only partner to the International City Managers Association. We're involved in a think tank based out of DC called the Aspen Institute, Project Play. While we fully understand that our industry is a pay-to-play model, we understand that there are a lot of kids who are not getting access to sport on a regular basis. And so one of the things that this facility will solve, and we will help to be able to solve through this facility, is access for the underserved. The kids that really can't afford to pay will get time at this facility. There are a number of initiatives that we run through our own venues. This is a sort of a quick run through of the existing venues that we control. Myrtle Beach, these we actually manage on behalf of the public clients. Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, Rocky Top Sports World in Gatlinburg, gives you a lot of room nights, economic impact numbers, all of that good stuff. The Hoover Met Complex opened up 2 years ago and is breaking records, far exceeding expectations in terms of the projected economic impact and spending. Rocky Mountain is another facility that opened up, and we've recently opened up Panama City Beach Sports Complex, and we have Hutto, Texas about to open. So in terms of delivering across the spectrum, planning, we have finance support, development, as well as management, and we have a network of facilities. We are now providing all these services from planning and funding to the management of these complexes, and we're also involved in the development side. Hutto, Texas is a project that I personally led for the last 12, 15 months. This is a national headquarter project for Perfect Game Baseball that ultimately landed in Hutto, Texas. It's an $800 million endeavor, essentially 24 baseball fields. This is their national headquarters, so it's quite sizable. But it's one of the first sort of, there's a trend in sports tourism that basically has, that understands that sports is the driver of traffic, right? And most of the money that gets spent when you go to a tournament or an event at one of these complexes gets spent on the outside of the complex. So it's restaurants, it's hotels, entertainment, all those pieces are the important pieces. So one of the aspirations that Perfect Game had, they run about 1,200 events across the country, 1,200 tournaments and events. They were looking to elevate the customer experience. We're getting to the point where, the organizations or the parents who are making these decisions don't really want to be standing in the middle of a cornfield, with no place to go, no decent restaurants. So this idea of the mixed-use component is becoming more and more important. So I think when we're talking about the project tonight, I think one of the things that I want to plant the seed is that we're talking about more than just a sports complex. We're talking about this as a destination. We're talking about, retails and restaurants and some of the other components. And I'll share an example of a current project that we have in San Antonio, which is very Disney-esque, very large project, but ultimately you guys would be potentially doing something smaller. So market opportunity report, ultimately at a high level, we think there's a significant market opportunity for sports tourism based on the 4-hour radius and the 25 million people within this area. There's a strong propensity for people to spend money on sports in the area, and we think if done right, there's a big opportunity there. We do think that further analysis of the sports assets and how the facilities will cash flow is merited. We have two private sector partners who are at the table who want to participate and understand that their contribution, their participation is not going to carry the project on its own. Ultimately, there's going to need to be support for not only the complex, but some consideration for what the other mixed-use assets are potentially around the complex. So we ultimately believe that a master plan has to be developed to capitalize on the traffic, and we have to, essentially work with those private sector, partners to figure out exactly what not only the sports asset looks like from a cash flow standpoint, but what the mixed use opportunity is around that asset. And we think that ultimately there's going to be a gap in funding that is going to point to, public sector incentives, and there are a number of different paths that we can walk, as we chase those incentives. Right now, our recommendation, based on the market report, is that we move forward with an institutional-grade financial forecast. This is a very detailed 5-year forecast of how the facility would cash flow. It's going to tell us what the economic impact and direct spending would be on the local community. And it's also going to tell us what the gap is, whether or not it needs to be subsidized and at what level, and what the direct spending is that would come out of that. We can also do a calculation of sales tax dollars and some of the other pieces, and make sure that we fully understand how operationally this would work. The other thing that came out of the market opportunity report, and everybody may have seen it, is I think the total value of the assets that was analyzed was $100 million. We were not recommending that we spend that kind of money here. We were just saying that all of the assets, based on the project team's definition of success, all of those assets are worthy of analysis moving forward. One of the things that our financial performer will do is it will right-size those assets. So when we look at the market, we'll understand the number of kids. There are 68 different factors that go into this performance, but ultimately we're going to right-size the complex down to something that's sustainable, that's reasonable. We have facility utilization summaries for every sports asset that will be a part of the performer, and we'll be able to tell you exactly what the right-size complex is for this market through the performance process. The other thing that we're going to recommend and make recommendations on is phasing. So ultimately, we may recommend, for example, that we start with an indoor facility and then ultimately we could move to outdoor. We may have phasing considerations for ice hockey versus outdoor fields, but we're going to be able to prepare the performer in a way that allows the Village of Homer Glen to make decisions about next steps and moving forward. And then once again, the crucial part of this financial performance is we're going to work very closely with the private sector partners to understand what it is they're bringing to the table. This is sort of the collaborative co-creation phase that we need to be in, and we need everybody to essentially understand that we're trying to build something special here. I mean, it's not only going to be a great asset from an economic impact and a direct spending standpoint, but ultimately, this could have far-reaching social impacts for the community, for families, because it's going to be a complex, worthy of a destination, but ultimately it's going to add, restaurants and retail and entertainment and other pieces that are going to add value to the quality of life of the local community as well. So phase 2 is the financial performer that we're recommending that we move into right now, once again collaborating with private sector partners. And then ultimately, once we understand what the numbers are, understand what the facility does from a cash flow forecast, we're going to move into sort of a very, it's a little bit like jazz, when you put together a master site plan and ultimately go out and have conversations with strategic partners. You're going to have presentations to medical and wellness organizations who might want to participate. There was, there's a lot of merit in being very close to the sports assets, whether it's urgent care, orthopedics, sports medicine. We're also going to look at key user groups and sports rights holders. We may be able to guarantee inventory and time at the facility. We will work, through local, state, federal incentives. Work with experts in TIF and other incremental finance, capacities who can look at how we can leverage the mixed-use assets to generate enough tax revenues that weren't there before, that will be there as a part of the mixed-use piece to support the development. So ultimately, we'll also bring in our master developer hotel finance partners that we work with across the country. Certainly I'm not saying that you have to use them, but there are introductions and people that we work with, Citibank and otherwise, to be able to introduce them to the project. This is the San Antonio Sports Wellness and Entertainment Venue. Once again, a very large facility, very Disney-esque. We're not saying that you guys are going to build something this elaborate with Class A office space and residents and resorts and a crystal lagoon, all that good stuff. But this is a project that's ongoing right now. So one of the things that we've done, we've been in market with them for the first couple of months. We have 2 hospital systems that are both fully engaged in conversations about wanting to join a venture on the site. We are currently talking to the independent school districts. 2 of them on the north side and the University of Texas have come to the table and are looking at the assets, sports assets in particular, and how they can use them and what inventory of time they can use for both the indoor and the outdoor assets. In total, this project is a $121 million sports asset, 175 acres. You can see the projected economic impact over the 10-year mark is north of 580 million, 1.3 billion at the 20-year mark is ultimately what will be generated. So that's just the sports asset. The mixed-use portion takes it up to 300 acres, double in size, estimated at 700 million in terms of mixed use. Once again, this is overly large, but I think you get the sense of the components that make up the sports assets, and then the other pieces that make sense, around the sports as the driver of traffic. Once again, just the ability, this is a part of the process that we would use in terms of pitch deck development, public presentations, and partnership development is something that we would lead moving forward for this project as well. It's a sort of a high-risk phase. It's a phase that has some challenges. There are early dominoes that need to fall as it relates to some of the partnerships as others come online. So, certainly if there is appetite to head in this direction, we're certainly, willing to walk the journey with you guys. But initially, what we're recommending right now, the thing that makes sense, the most sense, is ultimately let's look at the cash flow, projected cash flow for this organization. Once again, we do this time and time again across the country. The difference this time, as opposed to a baseline operating performer, is we will be integrating two private sector partners and their vision and their assets and the resources that will come to the table. So ultimately, we will have one iteration moved from a baseline performer, so we'll be in much better shape at the end of the performer process to understand exactly how this facility sort of cash flows. And then we can move into those mixed-use development and public-private sector partnership phase and figure out what the other pieces look like. So that was it from my standpoint. Any questions?
Who are the private partners that they talked about yet or made public?
Not yet, not until we get something with us. Okay. One is going to be a single partner. He lives here in Homer, Glen, and he wants to put up his own hockey rink. Yes, for the baseball, soccer. There's one big group, don't know all the people that are in it, but another person from Homer, Glen that lives here is in charge of it right now.
Do you have names of who, if I'm asking who they are, I mean, I assume they're local residents or close, but do you have names to go with the organizations?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, if I could, I can add some additional information here. So the first phase of the study that was conducted and completed and released this past week was actually the funding for that phase 1 development was split between the village paying for that phase 1 as well as these two private investor groups. The first private investor group is the Chicago Sports Complex LLC, which is made up of a number of partners in the LLC, of the primary being within the village of Homer, Glen. Mark Tomczak is his name. And then the other one is Michael Goch, who is also a business owner as well as a village of Homer, Glen resident as well. What's before tonight, consideration for the board, is to move forward with the phase 2 phase 2 financial performer modeling. And also before the board tonight, as part of that same motion, is splitting of the phase 2 costs in the same format that we did phase 1, with the village picking up half of it and the private investors picking up the other half.
Yeah, I guess that's why I'm confused with the motion. It says 35, but you're asking us for 17.5. Right, so the motion is for 35,000, but we're willing to pay 17,500.
Right, the motion is to approve the contract with Sports Facilities Advisory in the amount of $35,000. The agreement that we have with them would be between us and with them, the same as the phase 1. And then the additional motion is then that we would enter in a memorandum of understanding with the other two private investors, and they would pick up 50% of that $35,000. But our agreement for this is between the Village of Homer, Glen,
as well as SFA, and that was intentional. If you recall, when we went back and we discussed the first phase of the project, there was a lot of conversation at the board to making sure that the agreement was not a 3 or 4 party agreement, but it was really a 2-party agreement to make sure that our needs and our expectations were being met by SFA. And then we have these side agreements that we'll enter into after this is voted on tonight with the 2 other private groups.
Yeah, I understand that. I just think that it's out there in the public that we're spending $35,000. We have said tonight we're not.
Right.
You're asking for something. Yes.
Okay, just for clarification, there's 2 private groups. One is the LLC,
Yes, there are 2.
and the other is...
Mr. Coach, Michael Moore Coach. So with the agreement of the cost sharing, the village's cost would be $18,750. That includes the $35,000 plus the $2,500 cap in travel reimbursements.
Anyone else have any questions?
Is there a review of phase 1, or are we talking about this motion?
No, actually, this is...
Yet, but is there anything before we get to that?
Yeah, so tonight we wanted to have Gary here to answer any questions about the phase 1. So yes, please, whatever questions that you have, now's the time to ask him. He's here before he flies out before the weather turns. So any questions, comments, or anything, now's the opportunity to go ahead and proceed with those.
Yeah, I would just ask, certainly I think we've all read through the report at length. I would just ask for a brief overview for the general public, condensed down of what that executive summary was of that phase 1 as we consider going into phase 2.
Well, essentially, it was the 5 bullet points, basically, saying that we did determine there's a significant opportunity as it relates to sports tourism. We don't think that the project can stand alone with just private sector participation, and that it needs to be supported. We do think that the next phase needs to include right-sizing of the complex and phasing to recommendations that we'll make. And then it needs to be ultimately that we're talking about, for this to work, we're talking about a master plan that would include a mixed development component. Once again, not as large as San Antonio. You might not be doing the Class A office space, but you certainly may appreciate some retail and entertainment tied in. But those pieces will come after we fully analyze the cash flow of the sports assets. So we understand what the subsidy is, if there is subsidy, what capital is being brought to the table, and there's certainly agreements that need to be worked out in terms of the 2 private sector partners, depending on what they bring to the table. So we're looking at this as a very collaborative phase and an opportunity to get to a true bottom line number for how this complex will operate. We do about 120 studies a year, market opportunity through financial performer. So we're very comfortable with our numbers and very conservative in what you guys are going to get from us. But once that's analyzed, then our recommendation is to move forward with a phase that includes the consideration of mixed use and a master developer, a hotel, all of those pieces will be in discussion. But first, let's understand how the sports asset cash flows.
I think it was mentioned when we first discussed phase 1, but of that 120 projects that you guys take a look at on an annual basis, how many of those actually go forward and become shovels in the ground type projects?
I would have to go back to our guys and take a look. But yeah, I think you
ballpark on that percentage.
Ballpark, you're probably talking, I would say 30–40% actually move forward into. Once again, if you look at the timeline, that initial sort of planning phase is, it's a very early phase, right? There are so many things that need to be done to get the facility developed, and ultimately, who's going to manage, how you're going to manage all those pieces. So ultimately, yeah, that's probably my guess. But I can sort of confirm that I'm not one of the business.
No, that's okay. I just don't remember. I know it's something we talked about at the previous meeting, but I think why that's important is just for the public and for the audience to understand some context to this. That this is a process of exploring an idea.
Yes.
But even the 120 projects that you do on an annual basis, 30–40% of those ever come to fruition. So just going through this process doesn't necessarily mean,
That's
you know,
correct.
that it is exploring opportunities and I think due diligence. So that's why I asked that question. I just remember what the ballpark on that percentage was.
Yeah. So it's a, you know, I mean, there's a lot to do between now and shovel in the ground. You know, there are a lot of conversations to be had that can really add value to the performer once we know what the baseline performer looks like. And there's a lot to navigate. And it's, you know, sort of a high-risk phase of going into, you know, navigate all these partnerships and ultimately finding the incentives that, you know, make sense for the project. But I will say the one thing that we do know in our industry is that the idea of the privately funded sports model is a real challenge without the public support. Hence, you know, P3 partnerships. And the other trend is this idea of people for the first time recognizing that the mixed-use assets are the real sort of drivers, and that they are sales tax revenues and other mechanisms to capture that incremental revenue and not think of it just as a sports complex, because that's where the money gets spent. So more and more, especially in light of the competitive situation that you have with parents making decisions about which complex to go, they want to go to the one that has all of the other amenities, the other things that they can do, as opposed to standing in the middle of a cornfield somewhere.
I have a question for you. Are you done? Okay, sorry. You've been candid about saying that the private investment can't really support the sports element itself. So you've been pretty candid about that. Tonight's presentation, one of the slides you put on there, that significant, you used the word significant public sector incentives. And then on one of the pages of the report summary, it says, after meeting with the project team, you guys have defined success and you've listed some bullet points. And one of those bullet points is to create an operationally self-sustaining business model, limiting ongoing subsidy requirements. So, you know, you're kind of telling us both sides here. You're telling us that this thing right out of the gate can't sustain itself, the sports portion of it. And it's going to require some subsidization going forward. Are we going to get that information in phase 2? Will we know in phase 2? And also I have a question about right sizing. I'd like a little more definition about right sizing, because my worry about right sizing is that if you're saying that 100 acres, essentially 100 acres out there, $100 million project, if it were as built in what's in our packet piece, you're saying that's overbuilt for the market. It is not sustainable on its own as a sports element. And you're saying that we need to right size it, and we'll know that after phase 2. My worry is that, and it's not really a worry, but I'm hoping we're going to get that information in phase 2. We have 2 significant investors, but they come at it from a different perspective. They're not just pooling, you know, pension money or something and looking to invest that. They have specific needs that they are trying to address. One is an ice issue, and one is a field issue. And the way I'm reading this is like, if we were to say that we're going to downsize the ice issue, we may lose the ice investor, which means there's a much more significant lift for the village to handle if we go forward with this. Same thing for the field position. So I want to know if we approve this tonight, and I am glad that we do have 2 other private investors on the hook, not on the hook, but in with us right now to help us share this cost. Because I think this is good information that we as a board need to make these decisions. So I'm good with that pretty much, you know, going forward, but I want to make sure that I'm going to get what I need to make my decision ultimately. So if you can answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think we spoke about the right sizing exercise basically has us taking the total number of participants that are in the marketplace, and then we account for competition. And we take 3 different national averages. There's a blend of those averages by sport, and then we do it by drive time, and ultimately, you know, account for competition. There's just a whole mix of things that goes into saying this is the total pool of athletes that could be aimed at a 3-rink ice hockey surface, for example. I think one of the things that we're going to attempt to do in the performer phase is be able to, you know, we might even propose 2 or 3 phases, or give you the option to look at 2 or 3 different phases. And then the ability to slice and dice and be able to say, all right, here's the ice component, here's how it performs, because ice is typically a challenge to meet debt service. Operationally, it can do well, but meeting debt service is typically a challenge for ICE. But ultimately, if it's ultimately going to add value, and this is where the collaboration comes in, if it's going to add value to the destination and become a driver, ultimately it may be, and there is some subsidy for ICE, needed subsidy for ICE, and perhaps there isn't for some of the other elements, then that's something that you guys would take into consideration because it's a key component. And 6 months a year, the weather isn't fantastic and ICE is big here. So yeah, the goal is to give you guys sort of a multifunctional, flexible performer that you guys can look at. So we may come back with 2 or 3 phases in which you're going to be able to say phase 1's going to cost X. This is the capital involved. This is the cash flow. Phase 2 or these assets, these elements. But you guys are going to get a lot more detail. I think we walked through a performer the last time, and you can see the level of detail that goes into that. It's going to allow us to make some decisions. And once we understand how it cash flows, that's when we can bring in hotel partners, master developers, and other people to say, all right, based on the location, ultimately, when we settle on a location, based on the assets that we've analyzed, what are the other mixed-use pieces, from restaurants and retail and entertainment, what are the other pieces that could make sense, right? And ultimately, from your perspective, from a sales tax or an incremental sort of public incentive or public incentive standpoint, what could this generate that could go back into the project? And this is stuff that really wasn't there to begin with. So we're talking about a number of different paths at this point. But right now we just need to know what the cash flow forecast looks like. And you'll get it'll be a 5-year forecast. And ultimately, typically what we shoot for in that 5-year forecast is we would not even recommend it unless it becomes, at some point, it becomes operationally sustainable within sort of year 3 through 5. Ultimately, that's what we're looking at.
Is part of the public incentive to create a TIF for this district?
That's one of the options that we're looking at. But there are a number of different sources, but yeah.
I would say then you should really consider school districts because that's revenue that would be a loss to them, depending on it. I've worked with Ms. Farley before. We've had successful TIFs and shorten them up, and it's become beneficial for both the school districts and the village and so forth and so on. Just something that, as this board looks at that consideration, maybe should take that into account.
I have a question. Have you ever had one of these ventures fail? What is your track record?
We've never had a facility fail. Any of the facilities that we've managed, we've taken on, we have not had a single facility fail.
Okay. And if it just should happen to fail, what's going to happen to this giant complex? Is it just going to be empty? A waste of space?
Well, once again, that's why we're so conservative with our numbers. Because what we project today, ultimately, you guys might turn around and go, you guys manage it. And we would have to manage to our own numbers. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, and also I think that, you're saying this giant complex, every day I get asked questions about this. She had a lot of really good questions. Is this plan going to answer some of those? Because I can't answer those. Is this next phase going to answer some of her questions? The questions that we're getting every day? Like, is there going to be a levy? Is there going to be TIF requirements? This next phase will help us to answer those questions?
What are the questions specifically?
Tax levy. Will there be a tax levy? What is the gap? What is the gap? Is this next phase?
This is going to determine what the gap is. And ultimately, the strategy, to understand what the gap is, the next phase ultimately moving into, for example, the 2 hospital systems that we're talking to in San Antonio. It's a competitive situation. At least one of the hospitals wants to joint venture on about 45,000 square feet of medical space, research, urgent care. They have a building they want to do because they want it to be near the sports asset, and they want additional land around that building. So the fact that they want a JV and are willing to put in capital to the project, you can really leverage their involvement as it relates to the money that they're putting in. So, health and wellness partners, ISDs, you know, there are a number of different partnerships and a number of different ways to go, but ultimately we've got to get to understanding how this will cash flow and what the sports elements are.
Also, who's going to maintain this? All the maintenance people that we're going to, is the village going to have to pay all the maintenance people? The garbage collectors, the people that clean the place? Who takes care of all that?
That comes with the next phase that they're going through.
I know, but I mean, is that going to be a cost to the village and the taxpayer?
No, we don't want any charge against the taxpayers at all. That's why we're trying to do this, because the other option is, if we get to the point where we don't have enough money coming in, we don't have an option. We would have to charge the village municipal tax. We don't want to do that. We want to get business in here. You got to remember, everything this complex brings in business-wise, schools get paid for it. There's absolutely no impact on a school whatsoever. I don't think they're going to complain because they're not getting any, because they're getting money on it, they're not spending it. Down the line, when we get houses in here, then the schools are going to need more money. But this would compensate it right now. There's a lot of businesses that would love to come here to be around a complex. The hotels, there are so many different things that could bring all these people into the village, spend a couple nights here in a hotel, and then go back home. So there's no impact on
They get to
housing.
go back home. We have to live with it. Community and nature in harmony.
I agree.
We won't have that anymore. It'll be a
How do you know you
giant
won't have
light.
that?
I'm going to live across from it. There'll be lights. I was looking at the picture. I won't be able to see the night sky anymore. That's why we moved here.
I think the pictures were also like a huge Disneyland, but
Yes.
nothing compared to what
What
we're
we're trying to
talking
do.
about here, potentially talking about here. My question to you, sir, is if this was approved tonight, because it seems like this has been going on for years, how long will it take for you to get this information back to us?
Our typical performance process is 6 to 8 weeks. So, but I think we've got a fair amount of the analysis in terms of competition, events, and all that sort of stuff, which is actually why I think we had brought the price, the original price I think we were talking about was $45,000. We had brought that down to $35,000 based on the market research and information that we already had.
So we could potentially have the answers back before the end of the year.
I think it's going to be tight now. I mean, if there's a decision tonight, you know, we'll push as hard as we can, but with the holidays, you know, even if it's the first couple of weeks in January, that's when we'll have an answer. Yeah.
Before we move on any further on the discussion from it, there still isn't a motion. We're getting into the discussion of the motion and the actual approval. I think it'd be helpful if we had a motion and a second to open up the discussion.
Before we go there, can I just ask one last question on phase one?
Yeah.
And then I'm happy
Do
to
the motion.
Yeah, so on phase one, in your phase one report, you guys are on a project in Bedford Park right now, an indoor facility.
Yeah, I'm not,
Some number of indoor courts, somewhere in the neighborhood, published reports say somewhere in the neighborhood of $20 million project. I'm just wondering why that project, for all the projects that are referenced within this report for comparables and other things. Now, I know it's not open, and I think, again, published reports is opening sometime next year, but certainly would be online prior to anything occurring here if something were to occur. Any reason why that wasn't included in this report? It's a project you guys are currently working on, right?
Yeah.
So there's lots of larger projects across the country that are referenced, and in the chart of regional sort of comparable projects, that's just one that isn't, unless I missed it, I don't think I did, isn't in that report.
yeah, I'm not sure why or the timing, or, you know, I can get back to our business analyst team and figure out why.
Well, the reason I asked it, I think it would be a direct competitor, potential competitor at some level.
Yeah.
Again, we're sitting here today after a phase one.
Yeah.
We still don't know what shape, size, anything that may even be, whether it even makes, whether the numbers even work yet, let alone what size it is, whether it's indoor, outdoor, lights, no lights. There's a direct competitor coming online, you know, 20 miles
that
away.
direct competitor is going to be factored into this analysis.
Okay.
I mean, we know about it
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
I don't know what the timing was at the time we engaged you guys and where they were in their process.
Nice being built. I mean, it is opening next summer, so it's currently.
That'll be a part of our process. That'll be built right in there. We analyze every single facility within a 4-hour radius, every single facility. And we have a scoring system for management programs, operations, and essentially pull out that portion and say we're not going to get X percentage of the market based on their involvement and the fact that they're there. So yeah, that'll be factored in.
Okay, thank you. And you want to read the motion? Yeah. Okay, just so we can talk about the next step.
Is there a motion to approve the addendum to professional services agreement with Sports Facilities Advisory LLC to conduct a Phase 2 financial forecast pro forma concerning development of a possible sports complex in Homer Glen in the amount of $35,000 plus a maximum not to exceed $2,500 in travel expenses, and to enter into a memorandum of understanding between the Village of Homer Glen, Chicagoland Sports Complex LLC, and Michael Goyich to the share of 50% of costs of Phase 2.
So moved.
Variance.
Second.
Trustee Gray. Discussion. We're having discussion on it.
You were in the middle, so you want to go ahead and finish what you said.
No, I was talking about the timing of it. You know, this is just, it's gone on for so long, but in my own opinion, I feel like because we have these two outside investors who are looking to potentially invest substantial amount of monies in the village, at some level, it's prudent to do the next phase for the $17,500 so that we're not potentially missing out on an opportunity. It might not be this 100-acre opportunity. There could be, it could come back and say, the only thing that works here is ice, right? And then we can say, great, we got an ice guy. Or, come back and say, the only thing that's going to work here is it's 50-50. And we're like, well, that doesn't work for us either. We don't know. There's almost every question that's asked me on the sports complex, I cannot answer without going to this next phase. So it seems the responsible thing for me to do is to say yes to the next phase so that I can answer these questions and make an educated decision on where we go from here.
To see if it's going to be good for the village or not. As for what he was saying for sizing too, because when we first started into this, we were looking into a 60-acre complex, but we wanted it small and simple. And then we were trying to figure out how can we get some money into the village without taxing anyone. So the park district was thrown out there, but it's still a tax. You still have to pay for it. There is no municipal tax right now, so if we had to go to a municipal tax, then you'd have to pay it. Somewhere along the line, we need an income coming in here, and commercial's not jumping here. You got to look at Orland Park and look at New Lenox Around and what they've done. There's not a lot out there. Big box is gone, and you need something here that's going to generate money and sales tax for our village. So with him saying the downsizing, when Mark had first come to us, he said he wanted a 400-acre park with multi-baseball fields, soccer fields, lacrosse fields, volleyball. And when Mike Boyce came to us, it was for an ice rink, and he would have it indoor, so that would be a year-round process. And he would do volleyball along with hockey. Because right now, for the hockey people, it's very hard to get ice rink. Hockey's still very, very popular here. Some of the teams that I know, my son played for a while, if you wanted to practice, or sometimes you had to go way up north because there was no ice time available. There's a few rinks around here that are single rinks. Crestwood has one, Homewood has one, Joliet has one. Then you go out towards Romeoville and Bolingbrook. Bolingbrook has one, Romeoville has two. And Mr. Goyich wants to build the rink. It's not us, so we wouldn't have to maintain anything. We will hold no ownership of it. That will be theirs. So downsizing it, he went down to a lot less of a figure for outdoor sports. As for the indoor sports and for a facility that could house a bunch of things, because the building would be over 300,000 square feet, that it can handle everything indoor, outdoor, can handle concerts, can handle shows, can handle anything they want on the inside too.
Plus, it would be, like I said before, it would be good for the village because that's something that's year-round. Baseball and the rest of them stop at the end of summer, sometimes going into fall, but hockey starts up, and so now you have a new group of people come in. So they downsized it to where it makes some sense. If we want to go a little bit after that, we can add on to it. But it's nothing that's going to be done at the same time. Pretty much how to explain it.
Yep. Mayor, I'd add that in what you just said about the initial investor wanted to go with 400 acres, fields as far as the eye could see. You know, if there was great enthusiasm for that at the time, we might have signed on a dotted line and we'd be stuck here now with 400 acres and a lot of fields and not consulting professionals to come in and give us the pertinent information that we need to make these decisions. We might have gone down that avenue short-sightedly. So that's why, to the public's involvement in this, it's like, it is unfortunate sometimes. These things do cost money, and sometimes that money it looks like it's being spent imprudently, but it's not. This is information that saves you the hundreds of millions on the back end when you prudently spend the tens of thousands on the front end. So, that kind of makes the case for that. If we had just run with that ball, we might be sitting here in a much different atmosphere right now than we currently are. So, to Trustee Rogers' point, that's why I feel exactly the same way. We need more information to make an informed decision. To yes, no, whatever that decision is. Right now, we just don't have enough information at our availability. So I just want to make that point.
I would say when we approved phase one, there were a couple points I made on the record at the time, and I think those hold true today. One, I said at the time that I was only voting to support the phase one study because for the first time in a several-year process, there was real interest from private investors. And part of that was saying, hey, look, if they're interested, it's one thing to say you're interested, it's another thing you can put your money where your mouth is and share those costs with us on a study. And so that was part one. But part two, even at the time as we approved phase one, I said at the time, look, I feel like we've seen phase one, and I know this is a different consulting company, and I know it has a great reputation, but I think we all sort of knew from data we had seen previously that there is a market, there is a regional market, whether it's home or elsewhere, there's a regional market for some sort of youth sports complex. But at the time I also said, for me, this is step one, but I think I know the answer to this, and it wasn't because I'm smart, it was because we all knew there was a market. But the real questions were going to be in phase two. And that's the part we haven't had yet. And the points have been made. When you try to inform yourself on this issue, I'd say, and I think I'm probably speaking for others in conversations we've had, I don't have my mind made up on this project one way or another. There's not enough data. We don't know whether we're talking about a small 40-acre project, or we're talking about a 100-acre project, or if it's indoor or outdoor. Nobody has the answers to that because all of that has to work on multiple fronts. The private investors are, to me, the key here, and why I would simply say to residents that have concerns, even with the discussion on this, that I feel like we're doing our jobs here in that you've got potential private investment in Homer Glen, whatever that may be, whether that's a sports complex or any other commercial development. We have to entertain, when someone comes, you're talking big dollars here and big potential investment. And if it doesn't make sense for us at the end of the day when we get, and I think this next phase to me is kind of the big one where real decisions can start being made based on data and not guessing. If we get to that point and we say, this doesn't fit for Homer Glen, there is likely these investors go to somewhere neighboring because there is a market. And for us to just ignore that potential without doing the due diligence and the investigation and access professionals to make decisions based on data, I think would be a disservice to the community, because no matter what, and I say this about a lot of things we do, it's good to look at all possible options. We talk about Heritage Park, as we talk about everything we do. I just like to see all the different options and make an educated decision at that point. And so, while I'm supportive of phase two, I basically said I was supportive of phase 2 when I voted for phase 1, because phase 1, I kind of knew what that was going to say, and we've never taken this next step. What this next step leads us to, I think, is anyone's guess. And I would say, to some of the comments of whether there's an appetite for this in the community, I think that's absolutely fair. I would make one side point to the residents in the audience tonight. We always have a fairly informed audience. I just think on multiple levels, on multiple different issues, there were good questions, whether it's 151st Street or this project or stuff. It's good to have an informed electorate to help hold everyone accountable. It's how the process works, and I think tonight was very representative of that. So I would just say nobody that may support a phase 2 is saying, yeah, we're supportive, we want this. There's lots of questions still, but to make an informed decision, this is where the real numbers, what size project, does it look like numbers may work for? Okay, fine, step 1, and then step 2, what type of public investment with the private side would that look like? There's no answers to those right now. So I would just say don't misread potential support for phase 2 and getting additional data for clear support of there's a sports complex coming to town and just what does it look like is the only question. That's not my position today. And the last point I would make is I would say the same thing back on the private side. If after the first phase, if the private investors said, hey, we went in on the first phase and we went in 50-50, but this just doesn't, we don't think this is a market for us, and they weren't coming in on phase 2, I'd be a no. They're coming in on phase 2, and as long as there's the potential of private investment in Homer Glen, I think it's incumbent upon us to follow through and look at all of those options, and I hope that's what residents would expect of us on any issue.
I agree with what you said, Trustee Variance, because just because we're thinking about this next phase, it's not, paper, oh, they're building a sports complex. That's not what it's about. It's just to gain more information, because we have to also look at what this is going to do to the village. When you say quality of life is one thing. When they say quality of life means, 180 degrees difference. So we have to take everything into account because, key here is financing. And I don't think the residents would like to have multi-million-dollar bonds put on their back unless they have, we have to get their input too. It can't be just based on 6 people up here.
No, that's why we are going to the next phase of this. And probably the worst thing I did when I first started this is just saying it's a sports complex. This was never really about a sports complex. This was something to bring here, to bring businesses here, bring hotels here. Because you have to make it a destination. Otherwise, why would they come? They can go anywhere and get anything that we have in Homer Glen. They can do it all throughout the whole country. If you have something that's, you get someone who's never been to Chicago, and now there's a tournament. A lot of people come down here just to be able to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I would like to, my whole vision on this is if we did put a sports complex in it, it's surrounded with restaurants, surrounded with stuff that people could go to. Have a downtown. For chasing, right now I feel like restaurant-wise, we have some good restaurants in Homer Glen, but we don't have a lot of them. So where does people go? They go somewhere else where they have them. Well, they're spending the money out there. I want them to spend the money right here. I don't want taxes to go up. As for how we're thinking on this, there's not one person on this board that wants anyone's taxes to go up. If anything, we want them to go down or at least freeze. And John, we have talked to the schools before, but now they've had a kind of complete change of all superintendents, so we got to start from scratch. But like Trustee Rogers had said, there's not enough for me to be able to go out there or anyone on this board and tell you all the questions you have. And can we guarantee it will work? Hell no. Nobody could ever guarantee you the thing will work. But if we get something in paper that's showing us what it is and how others are doing it, and we're not going to go Hollywood like they did in Texas. We don't need a big pond. I want people. I want people to come in here and spend the money. So, are there any other questions from the audience?
Yes. I'm full of questions.
Could you please stand up and come up
Yes,
with
I would like to know how we don't have our own police force.
We don't want a police force.
Then how are you going to control all the things that are going to go on in this complex?
If we have to put on more, we would put on more, and then the complex would be the thing that has to pay for it. This is why we need the information from him, so we can give you all the answers, because a lot of them you're just guessing. But as for us to put on a police station, no. With us doing it under contract, we save around $10 million. I don't want to put on that, because then guess what? You pay more taxes. And I think our police force here is absolutely wonderful.
Oh, yes, I'm not saying that, but we don't have our own police force. This man here can't get stop signs in his
He's got the
neighborhood.
stop signs.
But what I'm saying is, there's so many things that it's still going to cost us all money. You can say that it's not going to raise our taxes, it's not going to cost us money, but it is. Because of all the hidden things.
Well,
There's
we're gonna
all
find
kinds
out
of
all the
hidden
hidden
things.
We'll find them all out. That's why he's here. That's why he's listening to the questions too, and he'll come up with the answers.
Okay.
And some of them we won't know for a while. So, you know, and I don't want to guess anymore, and I don't want to give you any misinformation.
Okay.
All right? I'm looking at what's out there right now, and I know it's working. And as for this village here, we've gone out trying to get almost everything that everyone has asked us for. There's no one coming right now. So, and as for us being frugal with the money, I think at the end of this year, John, you can correct me, we'll be debt-free.
As of next Tuesday, we'll be debt-free.
We own everything. We own the building. There's no one else around us that does what we do with what we have. But all we have to pay for all this is sales tax. There is no property tax.
I understand that, but still, you have to understand that, like this lady here said, and I'm saying we surround this. We're going to be the ones that are impacted mostly by it, by traffic, lights, things that we didn't want when we moved here. We wanted a nice, quiet community with a night sky and all of that other good stuff. And now we're going to have bright lights, traffic, hotels.
Well, a hotel would be real nice.
For somebody else.
Well, that's fine, but I mean, really stop and think about it. If you have relatives coming in, if God forbid there's a death in the family, or you've got a wedding and you've got people over, they're going out to, well now they go out to, Chimney Park has it, Orland Park has it, McKinney has it now, New Lenox is putting up more. They all make money off of this.
I understand.
Well, here's the other thing. If you're looking for nothing to ever change, then you have to buy a hell of a lot of property. Because you can't stop someone from being able to sell something.
Yes, all things in life change.
It does.
It's a constant.
So why don't we see if we can get something that is generating some money so we don't have to worry about anything?
I know, but it's at the expense of the people that are going to surround this.
Well,
And all I'm asking you is, please, remember that. I mean, we're going to be the people that are going to hear the noise. We're going to be the people that are going to see the lights.
well, we don't know about the lady. It should
Takes
still
away
conform under our
it
standards.
takes away our way of life. So, I mean, 25 years of living with a nice farm field across the street has been wonderful. And I understand that we do need, you know, money. Keep us in mind.
There are two more people out there. Two more, you've got it, and then I'm going to call promotion.
First question may be a little stupid. Is that still the only site that's being taken into consideration for this project?
And to your answer, that's the only one we've looked at.
It's the only one you looked at?
Everyone told us that you want something they can get off the highway and get right to, so they can get right back on the highway and get back to it.
Sir, can we have your name, please?
Sure. First name is Andrew, last name is Rodriguero. 51 years old, all but for 4 years. I've resided in this area. President of Homer Athletic Club. I agree with Brian. Just take a rocket scientist to realize that there's a market. HAC's been around for 60 years. Stallions football's been around for a lot of years. Homer Soccer Club's been around for a lot of years.
Because it doesn't take a rocket scientist also is we need funds to just support the facilities we have and have to operate and maintain ourselves. And it's not cheap. So with that being said, in this second report, this phase 2 report, obviously you talk about it's going to need support from hotels, restaurants, other sources of income. Is your report going to, obviously I'm assuming your report will detail what that need exactly is going to be. Will your report also touch on the demand for a hotel to come to Homer, for a restaurant to come to Homer, since all these other areas surrounding us, Lamont, Orland Park, Lockport, you go in any direction and you've got hotels, you've got restaurants. So the two main questions were the location, is you're still...
We'll find out for sure. Once we find out we're building it, then we'll sit down with them, we'll lock up some property.
Okay, and then the other one is, will the phase 2 report touch on, there's going to be a need for that other source of income, of revenue. Is it going to touch on...
Phase 2 report's not going to talk about the mixed-use pieces. Ultimately, any developer is going to be looking at that report to understand the amount of traffic, the resources, the visitation to the facility, that sort of stuff, before they start to say, well, these are the elements that will make sense. Sure, we can guess, certainly hotels, restaurants, all the usual suspects, but ultimately that is going to be in a future phase. So once we understand how it operationally cash flows from a sports perspective, this is the sports asset. We want to make a decision moving forward about how it's going to work, public and private. That next phase will be where we talk to the additional partners. So essentially what you're going to end up with is a baseline performer that has the 2 private sector investors integrated into that performer.
Which can support the facility on their own.
Right. We're saying we still think there's going to be a gap. Once we have that, then we're going to go and target hospitals, wellness, all of the other pieces to say, how do we fill the gap?
So that would be a phase 3 then?
That would be phase 3, yeah.
Okay. Gentleman in the back, last one. Who else wanted to speak? Nobody? Okay, real quick, Mayor. Ken, all right, Ken, your last one.
Just 2 questions. With this private funding for these 2 investors, who's going to have a final say? Who could use what, who could do what? You have private investors who obviously are going to be interested in recouping costs that they put forward, and then you're going to have the village interested in what's best for us as homeowners in this area. These private investors, some of them may not live here, they may, I don't know. But where's going to be a split if this were to happen? Because in your presentation you have some of these larger complexes that were funded by a park district. Obviously we don't have that, but they took that burden on. I assume they issued either bonds or they got approval for taxes. I feel more comfortable if the village owned it all by itself instead of having these. You have one investor who has hockey, you have one investor who has baseball. How's that split gonna?
I'm going to try to answer that instead of putting you on the spot there. We don't know the answers to that question, but I can tell you this much: what we do know. We do know that there's a reason why the contract for phase 1 and the contract for phase 2 is between SFA and the Village of Homer Glen. Because at the end of the day, the final decision has to stop right here with the board, with the village board. And that was a conscious decision being made, as I mentioned earlier, because we already are hearing from the consultants that we've hired that there's going to be a gap here. We don't know what that gap's going to be. We don't know what it looks like. We don't know what the methods or the economic development tools in the toolbox would be to fill that gap. But there will be a gap. That's what we're hearing. And so the question that we have to find out, which we don't have the answer to right now, is in this phase 2, what do each of those individual private investor groups bring to the table? What do they bring in terms of resources and cash and relationships? And then what will that gap be that then the board will have to determine how do we fill it, and is there a desire to fill that? that decision rests with the village board. It has to rest with the village board. What the ultimate relationship is going to be, or who's going to own it, if it's ever built, all those questions, those aren't important right now, because the biggest question we have to know right now is how does it operate and how does it get paid for? And that's why it's so important that our agreement is between the village, the Homer Glen, and SFA, because at the end of the day, they're accountable to that contract and accountable to the village board. That is in no way disrespectful to the two private investors at all. As the board members have indicated, we're thrilled that we have two private groups who have the desire and they have resources available that says, we want to partner with you. But we don't know what that looks like yet. We know there's a market, we know there's a robust market, but that's really, and we know that somewhere that market can be filled, whether it's Homer Glen or somewhere else, we don't know that. But this next phase will figure out what do they bring to the table, what do they want in exchange for that, and then what is the gap going to be that the village board has to determine how do we get it done if that's the desire of the village.
Thank you. Thank you. Could you please call the roll?
Trustee Gray?
Aye.
Trustee Rogers?
Aye.
Trustee Suisse? Trustee Variance?
Aye.
Trustee Kazmino?
Aye.
Aye, too.
You can-
Yes.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve ordinance number 19-054, ordinance granting a variance to permit hardy board cement board siding on the first floor of the dwelling in lieu of exterior construction standards requiring that stone or brick material cover 100% of the aggregate total of all first floor or story exterior for exclusively doors, windows, and associated trim, 75-67A, applicability and scope type of building or structure of Chapter 75, buildings of the code of the village of Homer Glen for certain real property located in the R2 single-family residential district, 15026 West 147th Street, Homer Glen, Illinois.
So moved.
Trustee Gray. Second. Trustee Variance, discussion.
Well, when I think of party board, it feels like a product that's a sub-layer, because I've seen it before. And a variance is for a hardship. I don't see this as a hardship.
Are you the homeowner?
Homeowner and builder.
Is this the home that's currently on that lot?
It is.
This is a far improvement of this.
Yeah.
I know, but all the examples that were there were based on houses that were built way before the village in our standard building code.
Well, I just pulled a permit last week to put hardy board on my house, so I'm a little biased to it. I think it's a good product, but I do understand the need for a variance because, we require brick going all the way down. But that being said, I always appreciate somebody that comes in and takes, no disrespect to the previous owners, but takes what looks to be a dilapidated property and puts a beautiful home on it and invests in Homer Glen and hopefully raise your family for a long time.
I'm working on it.
Any other questions?
I agree.
Okay. Gia, please call the roll.
Trustee Gray?
Aye.
Trustee Rogers?
Aye.
Trustee Suisse?
No.
Trustee Variance?
Aye.
Trustee Kazmino?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Number 3, is there a motion to approve ordinance number 19-056 on the ordinance authorizing the installation of 6 traffic control devices, stop signs, at the intersection of Cyrstal Lake Drive and Rankin Drive and Cyrstal Lake Drive and Cyrstal Lake Court in the village of Homer Glen.
So moved.
Trustee Rogers.
I'll second.
Trustee Suisse, discussion.
Mayor, I would just say I probably second what John said. I just can't believe we're here 10 years later. I was on the public safety, and when I came on public safety 5 years ago, it was old news. It had been discussed, and there had been studies, and there was, do we do this, and do we do that, and put out speed bumps and radars, and I live in that general area, so I make it, since I've been on public safety and been on the board, and this has come to my attention, I make it my point to take that street whenever I can, because I'm curious as to what's going on. And this stop, I was there Friday, and I was behind a school bus, and it was a little frazzling. I think I might have been talking to Trustee Gray about it. It was a little frazzling, because there are no sidewalks, so the kids are getting off the bus, and you don't know if the kids are going to the left. And then there was some kids who were on the grass, and they were wrestling, and I'm like, are they gonna run across the street? Do they look across the street? So I was just kind of sitting there. So I do see areas like this that don't have sidewalks, and the stop signs there have definitely helped. And like I said, I've been driving it for 6 months, and it is a huge difference. What I did notice though, Joe, is when you leave this, if I go from Bruce and I take Crystal Tree Drive or Crystal Lake Drive, and I leave this and I go into Fun Club, nowhere in that street does it have a speed limit.
Yeah.
So it just seems to me like
A speed limit or a stop sign?
Speed limit sign.
Should be, there's no limit to the street.
Okay, there's not. So when you pull in, if I'm going from Crystal Tree to going down that way, you know, if I come from Bruce and I'm going to now try to get out to Haas Road, you know, I didn't see one. So that's saying something. And I've been driving it for like 3 weeks. I didn't see one. So if there is
I'll take a look
one,
at that with the highway department, because that section of roadway too was a couple of years ago reduced down to 20 miles an hour.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I'll
isn't.
check with the highway department to make sure.
because that would also help coming in, because there's a lot of people who want to kind of cut through there and avoid the, you know, the scenic areas or whatever. So they'll cut through there, and they'll at least know once they get to Crystal, it's 20, but it's 20 where you just left too. And they don't know that because there's no signs there. So I really think it's something that public safety needs to look into. But, you know, it is sad that we're here 10 years later, we're still trying to like get these signs in.
Joe, you'll call Mike.
I mean, I can't see going against public safety and saying, no, I don't want signs there.
And John, I agree. In 2008, I was on the public safety, and we did look into it to put the signs there for you. But then we also had the state of Illinois come back and say, no, it doesn't meet the guidelines. So I mean, our hands are tied on a lot of things too. But we've gotten it done. I'm sorry it took so long, but since they put on, I see the same thing. The cars aren't racing down. So now they're permanent. Okay. Could you please take the roll call?
Trustee Gray?
Aye.
Trustee Rogers?
Aye.
Trustee Swayze?
Aye.
Trustee Variance?
Aye.
Trustee Kazmina?
Aye.
Motion carries. Number 4.
We're gonna miss you, John. It's been nice 5 years.
Mayor, if I was going to vote no on that, I would have asked to have the entire traffic study read into the
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Have a good evening. Is there a motion to adopt ordinance number 19-052, an ordinance amending Article I, registration of business of Chapter 83, the business operations adapted 5/18/2004 by ordinance number -4030, and now being amended to 11/26/19.
So moved.
Trustee Gray.
Second.
Trustee Kazmino. Discussion.
Well, I did not make the admin and finance meeting that this was discussed, but I feel that a $20 bump for a business fee for a brick and mortar store is nothing. I mean, we haven't had a change in that $30 fee for the last 15 years. So that's what I would have recommended if I was at admin and finance. Because $20 is not, I think it'll help the village do admin costs, etc. Because then when we look at it again in a year or so and have to bump it up even more, it's going to look like a huge jump when it's not really, you know.
Why do we have to bump it up more? We just bought a program that's supposed to help make the process smoother moving forward.
But I mean,
the cost should go down.
30 years ago for 50, you know, that's been.
Trustee Swayze, I'd like to jump in before Trustee Variance, because I can see.
Wait.
I'd just like to mention that
I'm going to jump in first on this one.
Right.
Right, because we don't want to raise it at all this year. Every business has been hurt by the road and construction for how many years now? So to add something to their business license, you know what, Sharon, I don't care if it's $2. There's some people that honestly don't have it, and for, when I go into a business and he starts telling me that he's already eaten up his retirement fund because he had to pay bills because there's not enough going out of his store, and then that for us to go in and say, well, here, you know, it's only $30, well, now we're only going to make it 50. And I agree, if we were going to put it up, I'd put it up more than that. But when you go to areas that are around us, they're right in the same ballpark that we are. And fortunately now we have a software company that is giving us, it'll be a lot easier than what it was before. It prints out everything, it puts the addresses down, it's in an envelope, no one has to write anything, no one has to sign anything. It's all finished up. But for this year, I couldn't raise it for next year because I thought that would just be a very big slap in the face for all the businesses at 159th, 151st, and 143rd, because a lot of them moved down to 143rd Street and made the traffic horrible there. So, don't mean to butt in front of you, but this one bothered me as soon as I heard it about you.
I just wanted to explain what Trustee Bury, because like I said, I see the chomping at the bit, but at A&F, we decided that we thought it was a little premature to come to A&F because it had not gone to CED, which really should be our vanguard on anything business related. So our decision at A&F was that we think that it should be sent over to CED for discussion because that's really the place where something of this nature should start at. And we also did say at A&F that we wanted staff to come back to us and make the case. Tell us what the actual cost is to administer this program per license. We didn't think it was $100. We'd like to know what the actual cost is that goes into it. Now, if that cost comes back and it's $120, and we all say as a board, you know what, we want to supplement that as part of the village because that's an incentive to do business in the village, then we can always have that discussion. But that was why I wanted to jump in before Trustee Variance.
It did come to CED. We did have a lengthy discussion, and the consensus, the unanimous consensus in CED was yes. Step one would be yes. We think there's a need to move from a registration program to a licensure program. And if anybody needs more details on that, I'm sure Manager Fryland will be happy to do that. But we agreed there's certainly, from a history, and in some ways I wish our former clerk was here, because I wish, realistically, I wish it was our former clerk that recommended this and brought this to us, because I think she firsthand saw some of the flaws in the system as currently constructed. And so step one for us was, do we need licensure versus registration? And the consensus was yes, with the caveat that by no means is this meant to be any more burdensome on businesses, right? We don't need 5 forms instead of a simpler form. This is just gives us some teeth in what was a registration system. So the consensus on that was yes, move to a licensure versus registration. On the actual dollar amount, which was step 2 of that conversation, the consensus was this is not meant to be make money off of businesses program. This is meant to be paid for the program. And none of us know as we sit here today how much that program actually costs us. And as we did it on paper, by hand, without the current computer system in previous years, even if we had some sort of general cost, I think those costs are going to change now that we have a more efficient computer system. And so what we said is, we'll keep it at $30, make it a licensure, keep it at $30, and go through 1 year of determining what is the real cost of this program for us to administer, and then have that discussion prior to the following year, that if it says, and we were specific about this, it wasn't just round numbers, it was, if this program costs us on average for the number of businesses we have in town, $42, then let's entertain $42, because that's what it costs us. If, and I'm not sure this is the case, but if it was $27 instead of $30, that may be the case too. But let's come up with again, back to the data. Let's come back with a real number that this costs us and base it off of that, not just pick round numbers because it's been at a number for, you know, over a decade and pick a new number. Let's make it something that when we do it, if we do it, we can justify why. That was the discussion at CED. That's the consensus and recommendation from CEB on this topic.
Thank you. Any other comments? Gina, could you please call the roll?
Trustee Gray?
Aye.
Trustee Rogers?
Aye.
Trustee Swayze? Aye. Trustee Variance?
Aye.
Trustee Kazmino?
Aye. All right, motion carries. Next is workshop item, 2020 sponsorship program. Sherry, you've got this one, or Matt?
Yeah, actually, I'll do a couple opening remarks, Mr. Mayor, and then I'm going to hand it off to my staff to walk you through. I can't take credit for this. It's been done by Sue and Amy and Matt. But one of the reasons why we started working on this was we don't have a comprehensive sponsorship program in place. We have been very good at getting sponsorships for our different programs, particularly Homer Fest is a good example. But one of the things that we wanted to make sure is that we had a comprehensive program that we could roll out for 2020, recognizing this would be our first year of the program, recognizing we're going to learn a lot. There might be things that have to be changed. There might be things that nuances that have to be done. But it's a good start to roll out because it also addresses some of the concerns we've heard from the business community about how many times we maybe go back and ask for sponsorships or various things, whether it's actual monetary or in-kind services. We also want to have a program that we can promote and market on our website and with all of our businesses to say, hey, here's an opportunity not only for you to contribute back to the community, but also to leverage our resources and our reach for the betterment of their own businesses as well. And instill community pride in the different special events that we hold and we will continue to hold, and maybe in the future years expand those as well. So that's kind of just the overview of this 2020 proposed sponsorship as it sits now. You guys have seen previous drafts. We made some changes since the last round that we provided to the entire board. There's a couple different types of marketing for this program we're doing, both on the website, brochures, folders. So there's a lot of different ways we can market the sponsorship program based on the needs of our local businesses. But having said that, I'm going to hand it over to Sue. I think is going first. We have a couple of slides here, shouldn't take too much time. And then there's some policy questions that we need to have some additional direction on as well.
Okay, just to recap why we have a sponsorship program. And as a community relations coordinator, I often get calls from businesses that are seeking ways to be involved in the community. They want to be a part of the events, and a sponsorship program is one way to give that business an opportunity. Also, our events, we do very well, I think, with our events on the little money that we spend. And we don't have tax revenue, and we look for ways to fund those events, and sponsorships are one way to assist us in funding the events. And the sponsorship program also provided clear expectations and consistency for somebody who's looking at supporting an event. We looked at what the exposure is for the business, and we want them to get the same treatment from one event to the next. And we also want to treat each business equally, so that when the business isn't spending more and getting more, that they're getting equal product for their dollars. And also to reduce the number of times businesses are approached. This past year we had an event scheduled for April. We had the fest in June, Chalk It Up in August, and Trunk or Treat in October, Veterans Day in November, and now we have Homer for the holidays in December. And if we wanted to get sponsorship for those events without a consistent program, we're going to businesses almost every month, do you want to support this, do you want to support this? By having a program set up at the beginning of the year, we can say, look, this is what we've got, and you can choose which event you want to sponsor, and also you can plan your dollars to sponsor these events.
Thank you, sir.
So I just wanted to also mention the past history of sponsorship. The village has received sponsorships from the first year anniversary. I was looking at some records, and we had a sponsor that planted trees. And so we've had sponsorship all the way through from Earth Day, Arbor Day to the Fest to now Movie Under the Stars as the most recent one. So I'm going to let Amy talk about what's new in this program.
Okay, so what's new? So as you may know, in tandem with this discussion about sponsorship is this discussion about our schedule of events. What are we doing in 2020? Just for my peace of mind and the village's peace of mind, it's nice to have a plan. What are we going to do? And, in addition to that, it was what new events do we want to add? Is there a need? Is there an ask for new events? So we did a survey and that we put out to the community to gather ideas. And, as you'll read, 89% of respondents believe that special events are important. And the two top events that were asked is Farmers Market and the Summer Concert Series. So over 80% in favor of both of those events. So we have added into this sponsorship packet a farmers market. The additional proposed event was a bike homer event, which was put out to the village to showcase the trail system. By no means are we saying this has to be done. These are in the early planning stages. We're looking for feedback from the board. But we'd like to mention that these are things that we're being asked to provide for the community. What else is new? So the program in general is new. The way that we've set it up, we modeled it after many other programs that are already out there in other communities. So I looked at a number of different programs, Frankfurt, New Lenox, Lamont, Romeoville, Naperville, so these are communities nearby, and modeled our program after theirs. Many of them had a matrix for each event that showed what the price levels were and then what the benefit was for each price level. And then some additional things that we've added to the program. Logo placement on bags. We already do a bag for Chalk It Up. In the past, we've just used leftover bags from the Homer Parade. But we need a bag, so we could potentially create new ones, and that's a place for logos. And then Trunk or Treat, we thought that would be a nice addition to that event. Two other new things in this program that we haven't done previously. So a heritage sponsor. This is a sponsor that is gold level for all events, excluding Movie Under the Stars. And it's just a way for a business to sort of have their hand in many events and spread their reach. And then naming rights. So this sponsorship level is basically a presenting sponsor. So, Homer for the Holidays presented by Business X. And it's, definitely a more expensive sponsorship, but we believe that then they get a little bit more for their money because their name is really attached to the event. And that does not include Homerfest because we just felt like there was no way to make that available to that big event. On the next slide, you'll see this is just a sample of what that program page looks like in the packet. There's the name, the proposed date, our estimated attendance, which we're using from our just past data, a short summary, and then the matrix. And I did provide for everyone the updated program packet on your chairs. So there have been a number of comments over the past couple of days that I've incorporated into that packet. And then Sue and Matt and I sat down the other day to just kind of really deep dive and look once again at the numbers. Do they all make sense? Do we feel like we're being fair? Is this something that we could actually get from our businesses? Is it a benefit that they would really want to have? So we kind of looked over that and just sort of tidied everything up for you. All right, and then the next slide, it's talking about what Carrie mentioned previously about how we're marketing this program. So we have, Matt, did you include the brochure?
Yes, the brochure's the trifold that should be up to date.
Right, so the idea of that is that it's going out with all the business registrations. It doesn't really have a lot of concrete information in it. It's really just a flyer that says, hey, we have a sponsorship program, talk to us. And then they would receive this packet if they're interested and request it. But in addition to that, this packet can be made available digitally. So we'll put it up on our website so anybody can view it at any time. And then the idea is also to send out email notifications to all of the businesses saying we have this program, you know, here's the link, and they can access it that way. And then the next step, in addition to just talking about this program, and if you have any changes or comments to it, is to put together a sponsorship policy. Let's talk about that.
Yes, so currently we have a sponsorship policy, and it's very brief. It's basically saying that we won't accept sponsorship for anyone we're in litigation with. What we'd like to see is some feedback from the board and improve upon that policy so that we can have some guidance. And here's a list of questions that we have. So like, shall the village reserve the right to not accept sponsorships for appropriateness? So we just put something in there and saying we have the right to review and refuse a sponsorship. And then the next question would be, should the village offer right of refusal to the naming sponsor for a following year's event? So if you were the sponsor, the main sponsor of an event this year, if we were to have the same event next year, we go to you first before that event is opened up to any other business. And then another question would be, does the board want to allow political campaigns to sponsor events? Some communities do, but most do not. Or the same thing could be said about an individual resident just using their name to sponsor. They're not running for a campaign or a position yet, but they may choose to sponsor a couple years in advance, so would we limit that? And then if you have any other items that you would like to see in a policy. And then also in a policy, I might include sponsorship application, the categories and the criteria for being a sponsor, and an approval process.
So you haven't put any of these into the program yet, right? These questions, your policy discussions?
Right. We haven't.
Because I'm looking at like I think the sponsor agreement page is basically the only one that says anything. It says reserve the right to cancel or change the dates, but it really doesn't say anything about refusing anybody or.
Right.
Because I think that's definitely a piece that should be in there, and not only that we reserve the right to not accept, but we reserve the right to reject after acceptance, because there could be a lag time between the time you accept somebody's sponsorship and their business goes socially off the rails, and you would not want to be associated with that. You know, you need to walk it back from that. So I think you need the opportunity to back yourself away from that too before the event takes place.
Well, a question I have is that something that goes in this program?
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's.
Or is it
that's
just,
the SOP.
right, it's just our SOP that contains all that information, and then that's a discussion with the sponsor. I have seen in some of the other programs, you know, from the other communities, they would have like a terms and conditions page that was at the back of their page that kind of had all the fine print. That's something.
This could mention on this sponsor agreement, it could say, per the regulations in the current SOP 9, you know, and we can modify SOP 9 at any given time, put something else in there or take things out.
And that gives us the power to say that to the sponsor.
Eric, is there anything wrong with just a general right of refusal based on it's a sponsorship program? There's no, I can't imagine there's any right that someone could say they have to sponsor an event, right?
Correct. There wouldn't be I mean, you can have a general right of refusal. I think what you're looking at is a lot of times this is going to fall on staff.
Yeah.
And staff needs to have that guideline in terms of where the right line tests. But you're correct. There is no right to say, I have the right to sponsor your event and have my name put on it.
Yeah, correct. And yeah, it will fall on staff. Whether it's as appropriate, because I mean, all of this is kind of in the eye of the beholder at some point, right? Whether it's a business that doesn't fit the event, because of the type of business use that just isn't a fit. I can think of any number of cases in which you probably wouldn't want certain situations sponsoring certain events based on age. Maybe there's demographics of an event that you may want to target. So I would just say, I would leave that, I think, defer to staff and legal to say some sort of broad waiver of refusal that we have on that it could be based on any number of things. But I do think we probably include that on that page, not just reference some legal SOP. I don't know what the problem would be with just saying, hey, you know, in print at the bottom, the village, reserves the right. And I don't know, maybe there's an argument why we wouldn't just say that. I don't know what it would be. I hate to get super legal if we don't have to get super legal and reference an SOP that they have to then go to our website. But I do think we definitely want to reserve that right. More than just if we're in litigation with somebody, which is obviously good.
And we can work with Eric on what that general language would be, just to protect the village and make sure that as this is going out for people to plan for their sponsorships, they see that we do have the ultimate right to reserve or to reserve the right to deny or to move also. Maybe they wanted to chalk it up, but it's not appropriate. Maybe then we'll reach out to them and say we can move it to another more appropriate venue for our event.
Yeah, I would
We do need some latitude on that, but I think I do agree that tightening up the SOP and reflecting that we have this official sponsorship program and bringing that back to the board at the beginning of the year is something we want to do, including the right of first refusal. If we have a good sponsor and they want to continue to sponsor that event, we see no reason why we wouldn't want them to.
I mean, out of respect for them stepping up. And
Absolutely.
why would they just say, well, you did it, you know, you struck the check the first year and it was a great event, but yeah, we're going to let somebody else do it.
Yeah.
You think that needs a cutoff date, though? You definitely need a trigger.
Yeah, we would go to them, he would reach out to them and to those, and we would say, hey, do you want to, before we start the 2021 sponsorship year, we would say, do you want to sponsor this event again for next year? And we would give them a short window where they have to say yes or no.
And staff, as we discussed this, we kind of discussed naming rights or exclusivity in the future, and we did think we were ready to have that kind of timeline for a cutoff to get that right of first refusal at this point, but I think it's our intention going forward for 2021 and moving forward to incorporate those types of deadlines so that we can kind of prepare ourselves and schedule, and so that we can reach out for events in case someone does refuse that. We want to give ourselves enough time to seek out another presenting sponsor.
I also think that it should be something that, you know, if that's a great idea to give them like a 1 month jump on it in the previous year, but I really think that the board should probably take a look at that first too, just through a page. These are our naming sponsors. We're going to reach out to them so that we have input as to, you know, I had a problem with that last year, or, you know, if there is any input to be had. So.
Right, we want to make sure that whoever was that presenting sponsor fulfilled their obligations to the village as well.
You know, relative to the political things, you know, we've talked about with a couple of the trustees, and that's a tough one because, I mean, I only speak for myself, but whenever anybody comes to me in the village and is looking for donations, or whether it's my kite or, you know, whoever, it's like I feel like it's part of my, you know, duty, I guess, for lack of a better word, to do that because, you know, I do draw a salary, and I don't mind supporting them, and I don't mind being a supporter of anything that's in the village. And I think you'd be turning your back on a lot of money, because, you know, we've had some excellent senators and representatives in our state and our town, and, you know, for us to say, well, you know, we don't want you to be a part of these events, we don't want your name out here, you know, that's a tough pill to swallow. But then you do have, you know, some candidates where you're like, that's a tough one.
Wouldn't it be just easier just to say no? You
No, I think it's easy
because then
you're turning your back on a lot of money.
Well, maybe we can clarify this, because I
Right,
don't know.
to do
This says
something
political
more.
campaigns, right? And that's different than elected officials.
Well,
Are we
that
making
will
that
have to be
clarification?
worked
Not
out.
that in this question, are we assuming elected officials are okay, but candidate campaigns are not? Or anybody in office, running for office, any type of thing like that? Because I do think there could be a distinction there too.
And that's what we want guidance from you for, because are we gonna limit it to just campaigns or candidates and then what about the person that's just got their name out there?
I think I was fine with elected officials, but the political campaign things, I've seen that go sideways.
I think, to clarify, the intent of that question isn't to separate those two. I think this was just to kind of bring this whole topic forward.
Right. That's why I said elected officials.
Right, no, that makes perfect sense, because basically the electorate is doing our vetting.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah, exactly. Anybody can be a candidate, right? An office holder has passed some sort of litmus test or standard with voters. So I think that is a good distinction to make. It helps clean that up a little bit. At the same time, I think a general point on the whole program would be go into this eyes wide open. That no matter what we do, no matter how we word that, reserve the right to refuse, no matter if we include elected officials, not include, no matter what we do on this, if we're going to enter into this sort of sponsorship program, there's going to be, at some time, it may not be year 1, it may not be year 5, there's going to be at some point a very uncomfortable decision to be made, again, whether not that any of the elected officials are political, could, or a business, or because we reserve the right doesn't mean that somebody doesn't take that. And there is if we're going to go down this road, just know there's going to be bumps in this road. And we're going to have to be okay with that. And if we're not okay with that, then reconsider doing the program in general, because the bumps will happen. To what level, what degree, I hope not. And maybe it never does, but you have to assume it's going to happen in some way, shape, or form. And to your point, staff is put in a tough spot, or whoever makes the ultimate determination on whatever it is. It could be an elected official, for example. It could be an elected official that is in office, but is currently, had something taken out by the federal investigators, but currently still in office. And just any number of ways that are those realistic? Probably not, but there just is potential. So
it's good to be cognizant of it.
Yeah, let's just go into it eyes wide open. There's going to be some bumps no matter what at some point. And I think we just have to be okay with that risk and manage that to the extent we can.
I think we need to approach it like we've approached a lot of the things that we've been doing here. It's like we need to kind of dip our toe in the water here, not just go off the diving board. So maybe there's some way that we can kind of scale this down a bit for the first year or two to make sure we're not missing something. I just feel like there's something hiding in the weeds, but I don't know what it is. And it might be a bunny rabbit, but it might be a grizzly bear.
I appreciate that, but I think that, Amy made a great point. She's researched a lot of our peer communities and our surrounding communities, and I have too, and a lot of them are very similar. And to your point, they don't have a lot of language on there giving them cover, and so I think we're really being prudent right now, saying let's get some language in there to really make sure that we are, trying to kind of think this through. But it does seem like there are a lot of these out there. To the other point you and Sue had made about, that it would be available online and there would be a brochure and they would have to almost request this level of this. I think that might be a missed opportunity. I think this is a really nice presentation, and it really gives somebody a lot of energy to get involved and do something. And it also gives businesses an opportunity, especially in the fall when they're planning maybe their next year's budget, to say, hey, wow, this looks great. I could do, I always gave $1,000 to Homer Fest, but boy, this is really germane to my business. I'm a bike shop, I'm going to do Bike for Glen, and maybe I can even do that chalk thing too, because kids ride bikes, so maybe I can split up my donation dollars and I can get 2, and I'm getting, ultimately this is about involving the business community and the residential community together to harmonize and to really build the community. It's not really about making money, so it's really get those things together to keep them both strong and robust. So I think it's a good opportunity to get this whole package in this dynamic in their hands and say, hey, look at this, you make those decisions, so.
And I can tell you right now that I've talked to people, whether it was about sponsoring Homer for the holidays or the fest, and I've been telling them that we will give them information. We're trying to work out a program for next year, and there are a lot of businesses that are interested in seeing what, and they want to see what we have to offer. So that's what I'm looking for, is guidance on, can I go ahead and proceed? Where do I go next?
And I would say that I give a lot of credit to the board for thinking through like the what ifs or, you know, the unknowns, like you said, what is it, a bunny or is it a snake in the grass? But hopefully it's the bunny. But I could say based on my experience doing this, and I did it in the community recently, you know, right next door, and I can tell you that there's always going to be a few little bumps. You know, some of the sponsorships, people sometimes get their nose bent out of shape because someone got, you know, is doing a larger donation than another one. But I could say even those small little things, this type of program, the benefits far outweigh the concerns or the bumps in the road, because it really does get the community, the business community, engaged in a very different way with the local government, municipality, and it really does. You can be amazed at what you can grow off of this type of sponsorship program from like year 1 to year 5. It's completely amazing to see the growth in that and the opportunities that brings them back to our residents that we serve by growing something like this. So I think it's really going to be very well served, and it really is about, like you said, Trustee Gray, partnering the community assets with our business assets, and they both feed off of that, and there's a benefit for both of them. And I do think that over time you'll see maybe someone who starts at a lower level, they always end up going higher the next year, or then the next year, and trying to reach for those additional reaches for the different special events.
That's a testament to the program.
Just a little bit on the nuts and bolts of it. How did we come up with some of the dollars that I know it's draft, but how did we come up with some of the dollars? Naming rights on Home for the Holidays would be $5,000, Trunk or Treat is $1,000, Movie in the Park is $8,000. I know that's multiple events. How did we?
Well, it's attendance at those events. How long is the event for? How many times do you think that somebody's going to see that banner? How many views? How much social media promotion is there? And then we compared that with other communities and other sponsorship programs, and that's how we came up with
I'd also add that also the cost of the event was considered in those items, especially Movie Under the Stars. The equipment and the rights to the movie are more expensive than the Trunk or Treat, which is kind of a participation-driven event. So that's why that event specifically is higher, because of the cost that it takes to put on that program.
So maybe a little bit to Trustee Rogers' point about making sure before we go with this, we just look at everything. And to Trustee Gray's point, if I'm a business, this isn't necessarily, this is a business decision. It's not I want to be good to the community. This is, what do I get in return, or what type of exposure do I get to a certain number of eyes? And so when I look at it and I go, okay, so I get that there may be more cost to Movie in the Park, right? We know that. But if I got this right now and said, for $8,000, I get 3 events at what we're estimating $600 per movie, or for $5,000, I get $3,000 in one event at Homer for the Holidays. We just need to make sure all of these from every different, because to me, bang for the buck there is Homer for the Holidays, because I'm going to get more eyes in one event for $3,000 less. Just as we go through, and this, I know this is draft, this is I think the point of this whole discussion. Let's just make sure that we look at that from all those different angles to say, we don't send this out the first time and someone goes, wait a second, this was misbooked. And the other point I make is, I do think, because these are business decisions, there is something we have to decide whether this is meant to cover costs for an event or whether this is meant for the businesses getting something of value, right? It's not them just being nice and wanting to be good to the community. They're getting something in exchange. So I would also say something to consider is, if we're getting, there's just one event, and that dollar amount, whatever that is for whatever level of sponsorship, we're just getting multiple requests for naming rights. Maybe that, the second year we look at, that may be a higher amount. There's a, that's the way the system works. And I feel look, nobody's being forced to sponsor anything. That's a business decision. So I don't want to get caught up on just covering costs. I want to look at this the other way of, for that business, what's the most bang for the buck? And that's how they're going to look at it. And if there's supply and demand, let's, look at doing that on an annual basis as we go forward. I would say in general, just my opinion on this would be, I agree, let's put something in their hands as opposed to maybe just this and go to our website. I think something more full. We've got somewhere in the neighborhood just south of 600 businesses, registered businesses right now. That's not a big number to be able to mail, but I also say, just my opinion, when I look at it in a folder format like this looks a bit intimidating. When we look at it in the PDF and we kind of flip through it, if we went to print to mail something, I think it'd be better in a book format to flip through than it would be when I open this up and I've got 10 different tabs to pull out, maybe one at a time. It's just my general feedback on that. It may be better in book form to put something in the mail, but I think if we're going to do it, try and get it in front of the most eyes possible, and whether it's with the registrations or not. What I don't think we do is try and push this out to get in the registration mailing. It can be a mailing on itself. For the dollars we're talking here, you're talking about a mailing of 550 businesses.
Well, it always was going to be a separate mailing.
Okay.
That the little brochure.
This goes out separately, this goes with the registration?
Right,
Okay.
just to tell people, hey, we have a program.
Okay.
And then, the original idea was that we were then going to do a separate mailing. And we started with the book format. And then we moved to the folder format, thinking that maybe gave us some more flexibility, because once you find a book, then you can't take out a page or alter a page. You have to retype the entire book.
But would we do that once we're advertising the sponsorships for that year? It'd be hard to change it once it's out.
Yeah, we were thinking actually we might, just because we already know we have someone who's very interested in the movie series. And so as some of those naming rights and exclusivities get taken, we thought it would be an interesting concept to say, okay, this one's sold out, and put on that page, sold out. And it also generates excitement about the special events program as well, because there's a demand out there for these type of things. So we were thinking that the folder and having the individual sheets, we would probably update them as some of those things get sold out over the year, over the sponsorship year, to say, hey, and that could just add to more of the overall success of the program.
Yeah. I would honestly defer to staff on what formats it's in.
We want it to be as easy as possible for our businesses to understand.
Yeah, and this is a lot, I think, to get through. Is there going to be a way, if I went online, business owner that goes online to not have to do this on paper and mail it in, can I fill out that form and do it on our website as opposed to hard copy?
We can make that possible.
I'm going to be much more likely to go on the website, fill it out, and make my payment.
They can't make a payment online right now, so they would have to send in a check.
I would say let's explore that, maybe not year one.
We're looking at how we get all our payments online.
I'd say it is 2019.
Yeah.
Just to increase your rate of, lower down, the naming rights sponsor, right, and cheap. But if I'm a $125 sponsor, I want to be able to go, spur of the moment, yes, this sounds good, online, fill it out, send my money in.
And we do have businesses that just like to use their corporate credit card to pay for their sponsorship.
Yeah. And also like to add that, if we're starting to kick up our game, basically we're starting to go to new levels, better levels, we need to improve our game out front too, where we're putting up these 4x4 signs that they look great, don't get me wrong, but we have to make that anybody driving by is going to go, I'm going to look over here to see what's going on. So we have to make that the destination. And we also have to make sure that, the world doesn't end at 4:30. It's dark outside right now. You can't see any of that stuff out there. So a creative solution to be able to see at night.
No much. Marquee.
Well, we don't have a village sign up front, where we have the 3 lines where you can put things about our events, or things like that. So those are things that as we begin our budget conversations for 2021, those are some things we'll look at.
Okay.
I I think I heard Trustee Gray volunteer to do the sandwich board on weekends out front.
Dressed as a cow.
Yeah, I think I heard
Statue of Liberty.
I think I heard that. One other thing on the layout, I would just, again, this is, I think you guys are doing a phenomenal job in general, right? That we're sitting here talking about a program to sponsor special events in this town, to me is so phenomenal, because it's getting to that point where you see the attendance, you see the demand, so it's coming online, and so this whole discussion is a great one, I think, for this town to be having. If there is demand and eyeballs to actually have businesses benefit from. So I think it's phenomenal. I think the events have been great, and just in general. What I would say before we go to print on this is take maybe one more look at some of the photos on each one, right? When I look at like Homer for the Holidays, these are three beautiful young ladies, right? But I don't think it encapsulates what I'd be getting as the business of for $5,000. Maybe on that, we got the renderings of the lights or a picture or something for now, just a little bit more of a vision of, okay, I got scale of event. Just keep it, I would just, say, take a look at those and make sure those are fitting what that business would get as best as we could from an image standpoint. I think that's everything for me. As I said, overall, I'm super excited about the programming, the events. The demand is obviously there and pent up. I think you guys have been doing a great job. I know it's been a lot of added asks of staff, and I know it's not all paid time. So I just thank you to not just our special event people, but staff in general, because we've come a long way in a year talking about, from a budget standpoint, hey, let's find more room in a budget for special event type staff, in addition to what we're already doing, and some dollars to help budget that stuff. We've come a long way in a short period of time, not in the general sense, but in a more recent sense, and I think it's fantastic. So do I.
I have one more question about Chalk It Up. It says the sidewalk surrounding Homer Glen's largest park. Isn't it going to be at the Stonebridge anymore?
Well, it's
No,
grown.
the goal is to have, the events,
Here.
out here.
Okay, so this would move over to Heritage.
Yeah,
Okay.
I
I thought this was still for Stonebridge, I was going to say.
Well,
it outgrew it, we you had to put like a minimum number on it because there wasn't enough space. So last year, and I believe once it moves out here, more people actually come and see it. It's just going to get bigger and bigger. So we need this space. We want to utilize this. We've been building this
Sure.
park.
I'm okay with that. I thought it was still preferred to Stonebridge.
Not anymore.
No. I didn't get them.
No, they also ran out of parking over there. So. All right, any other comments on it? Well, I piggyback on what Brian had said. I mean, thank you for the entire staff, and thank Louise for helping out with this thing from Matt. It's wonderful what you do for us. So, we thank you. Is there any old business? The only thing we had under new business, Christine just has a 6-month report to the mayor and board of trustees, and we will be doing that December 11th. I need a motion to